Welcome back to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. And on today's episode, I interview Marc Hildebrand, current LAPD sergeant and host of the LEO Family Fitness podcast. Now sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my special guest today, Marc Hildebrand, you guys are going to love. He's got a fascinating story. He's been serving the city of Los Angeles for quite a few years as a police officer, and I think it's going to be an amazing episode. But before we talk about him, I got to be selfish and talk about this podcast. Where can you hear it? You can hear it pretty much everywhere there's a podcast platform. iHeart, Pandora, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, you name it. That's where you can find the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. If you want to learn more about me and my career, you can go to mattcubbler.com. While you're there, you can also order a copy of my book, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, which was a book I wrote 15 years ago about my brother Andy and I and our life together. My brother Andy was autistic and a severe stutterer, and sadly was killed in a car accident in 1989. And it's the greatest tribute I could ever give to my brother, and it's the greatest accomplishment of my life. So I would appreciate it if you guys took a little bit of time and read a true, heartfelt, inspirational story about a person who I believe was the greatest human being to walk this earth other than Jesus. So I appreciate that. So go to mattcubbler.com to get that book. All right, man. Marc, what's up, buddy?
Matt, what is going on, brother? Let me just say for a second, acknowledge and appreciate you for that, man. First off, for putting that book together. That is like, man, that it's making more of an impact than you can even possibly imagine. But being so like forthcoming with talking about those things, talking about like those kind of discomforts. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Is like when we can get together and we can hear stories like that, that has the power to like change all of us. And you basically did that. I mean, you basically are giving us the best of your brother by putting a book together like that. And it takes a lot to put something like that together. I know. So I just want to take a second and just say, I acknowledge, and I want to appreciate you for doing that because it's hard work, man. And at the same time, it's making a huge impact.
I appreciate that. And it's, we can maybe in the show talk about that a little bit if it gets there, but the hard part of writing your life story is reliving it all over again, especially when, But I'm not going to lie. I think it is the greatest gift you can get is because it gives you context and it gives you clarity and it gives you appreciation for the journey and the fact that life isn't simply just a matter of ahas, right? It's not a matter of, well, a lot of that happened today. And there's not a connective component. There's always connection. There's always one thing leads to another. And there's always consequences and benefits to actions that we take in our life that ultimately, I believe, we end up where we're supposed to be.
Right.
I always tell when I mentor kids, I'm like, we're all eager to get ahead and achieve whatever it is that's on their plate that they want to achieve. I'm like, just remember, you are where you are when you're supposed to be there. God doesn't make mistakes.
Ooh,
and
powerful.
If you keep doing the things that you're supposed to be doing and working hard and being positive and having intention every day, then where you are is where you are when you're supposed to be there. And for me, I wrote this book 15 years ago and it's still going strong today. And it's because my brother's story is, first of all, amazing. And secondly, it was written at the most vulnerable part of my life that I needed to have that. I needed to have this happen. And when you have that moment, whether it was by choice, design, or it was chosen for you, which was what happened to me, people recognize when they read the book, and it's one of the things that I love hearing is that they can hear my voice and hear my brother's voice when I'm telling the story. And when my brother never had friends call him to come out and play. He never had sleepovers. He never had birthday party invitations. He never had anything. He had me and my circle of friends, and that was it. And now everybody knows him, and that's everybody knows him for who I saw him as.
Right.
And they don't hear his stutter. They don't see his face contorting. They don't see the very odd autistic tendencies that he had. They just see my brother through my eyes. And that's, I think, the greatest part of writing a book about someone you care so deeply about is that you can share the person that you knew with them, not necessarily. And there's people that may remember my brother as the stutterer, and then that's not necessarily the person that I want people to know. I want them to know his heart and his kindness and his gentleness and his forgiveness of everybody. And I think that's what the book's value for me is, that hey, it's my kids who never, my wife who never got to meet him. They know their uncle and brother-in-law in a way that is powerful for them, but also people that are complete strangers get to experience someone who I truly love. So, well, I appreciate you saying that, man.
Oh man, it's that's a game changer. I mean, you have this this catastrophe that happens, and you get to make a decision, right? And your decision is to use this as an opportunity to literally spread his word. Dude, if we could just end the podcast on that, and we wouldn't have to do any more. Like, if anybody could capture that, like, we get to make a decision in that moment. And if you decide to make it an opportunity, you could just freaking run with it, or you could let it be like your demise, right? And you made that conscious decision to make it your opportunity, man. So hats off to you.
After 13 years of making it my demise, that's the scary part. And I think we're probably going to go down this road anyways. Just and we don't, and we're gonna start the show normally like we did, but this is a great little beginning. Is the realities of life are that everybody goes through trauma. Everybody's going to have that moment where they think it's the worst moment of their life. And at some point in time, it's going to be the worst moment of your life. Like, that thing is probably going to be the worst it's ever going to be. And I'm 50. I just turned 50 last week. And I can honestly tell you that my brother's death was the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my life today, up to this point. And I did not handle that well as an 18-year-old when he died. And he was 21. He was older than me, but I was the older brother by 3. And I left a month later to go in the military. So it wasn't like I had this period of grief and suffering and healing. I had anger, and then go 4 years using that anger to help the United States government. And then the next, 8-9 years after that, being a cop and trying to find that purpose again, that reason, why do I get up every day? And then still being angry as hell and pissed at God, and what was me, why not me, why him? Like, all those questions that come into your head. And it wasn't until a moment of grace that I had happened to me that caused me to go down and write 28,000 words in one night of memories about my brother that started this process. Something happened to me, and then I went and wrote a shit ton of memories. It wasn't like I said, hey, I'm going to write a book about my brother. It was just I had this undying desire to get out what was in. And that, when people say they read the book, those are when they tell me which parts of the book were the clearest to them, the most vivid, it's those that were written that night. So just because you're going through the shit, just because you're on the hamster wheel of depression and hate and anger, doesn't mean it goes forever. It's just that you have to, sometimes it's an external thing that happens that causes you to get off the hamster wheel. Like, I knew I was on it. I knew I was angry. I knew I was having problems. I knew I wasn't happy. I just didn't know how to get out of it. And everything I tried to get out of it that I thought was my catalyst to get out wasn't. And it was frustrating me every time that this is it. This has got to be it. And then it's not. This has got to be, and then it's not. And then it was God that stepped in and said, come here, let me help you out. And that's, those things are, I believe, happen to everybody. And it's just a matter of identifying them and then accepting them and embracing them, and then, making it, leaning into it, as I say. And that's what I did. But yeah, that was 2002. So it's been 19 years since.
Yeah, I mean, and you were kind of talked about this, like, you were put in a position, like, we're always put in a position where, like, we're exactly where we need to be right now, right? And that's kind of what happened. And in the moment of all that stuff that's going on, like, and all that struggle that we have going on, we want to be the person who gets out of it, right? But sometimes we have to experience some of that stuff so that we can get to that point where we're ready to get out of it, right? And when I constantly believe that, like, whenever we're really ready to get out of it, opportunities present themselves. And it's not because like they weren't there before. It's just because our eyes are open to like, hey, there's a different way. There's a better way. Like if you had not been open to going downstairs and writing those words, like you wouldn't be where you're at right now. Like all of those things that you've been able to do and all of the people that you're able to impact in this podcast and all the stuff that we talked about before we got on and started recording, that wouldn't have happened. Right. And so, man, it's just so powerful. I know it's difficult in that situation, but when you get there and you're really open to like getting somewhere else, I mean, opportunities present themselves. And I know it sounds woo-woo, but it's 100% true because it's the same thing that happened to me in my story.
Well, let's get to that. Let's, I don't have a plan on my show, and I like it that way. And as cops, we don't get to have plans. We get to have tools. We get to have techniques and tactics. But we don't know which one we're going to use at any given time, and how the situation is going to dictate how we use them. Which is kind of why I created the podcast the way I did, because I'm in my zone when I'm thrust into the moment. So I asked one question. I asked the same question every one of my guests. And it's a broad question, and I'm sure you know the reason why I ask broad questions, because it allows me to see where you are in your mindset and where you are in your thought process, and allows me to decide where I can dig deeper, or if I see cracks or openings that will allow us to explore different topics. So the question I ask everybody is, who is Marc Hildebrand?
So I'm going to pause there for a second and really think about this, because I'm a firm believer, like our words create worlds, right? And so I'm a husband. I am a father of 2 amazing kids. I'm an online health fitness coach for police officers and first responders, and I am a police sergeant from LAPD. I've got 18 years on. And the reason why I said that is because, and in that order, is because early on in my career, I would always lead with, I'm a police officer. Like that was my badge, right? That was like, this is my job, but this actually me, like this is me. And what I failed to realize is that in the importance meter, yes, I love what I do for a living. But when I did that, I lost track of not only my health, but the connection with my family, with like kind of like letting them down, thinking that I had to give it all to my career. And so when people ask me, you know, hey, who are you? Like, what is it that you do? The natural response for most of us is like the first thing we want to do is like what we're doing for like our career or for our job, right? And I always make sure that the first words that come out of my mouth are the most important to me: being a husband and being a father, because that trumps everything. If there's one thing that I want to succeed in, it's those two, and those 2 areas are not areas that we ever get trained on at all. You know, we spend 990 hours in the academy, we get out on the street, we still don't know what we're doing, right? But when then we get married or we have a kid, and it's like, oh, you know, make it kind of happen. So if I had to say like who I am a person who I focus on my most important priorities, which is my family connection, my mental and physical health, and my career/business. And I don't, I have downtime, but I make sure that those things are like that at the top priority, not just with my words, but also with my actions. And so that includes the way that I communicate and tell people about who I am, because I want them to know like what's really important to me, because I don't want to be inauthentic. I just want to, like you, I like to just, whatever comes up just kind of comes up, and it just gets people to see who the real Marc is. Does that make sense?
Very much so. And it's, and you know, I think I'll probably generalize, and it's probably not accurate in its totality, but every police officer, when they become a cop, everything they wear is cop gear. They have the cop license plate, they have the thin blue line, they have the FOP tags or whatever it's all cop all the time, 24/7. And then, you know, and it's a thankless profession in most cases. There are people that appreciate us, and they, you know, they tell us that, but the feeling in general is that it's a thankless profession, because you're expected to solve everyone else's problems and do it perfectly to their standards, and sometimes that can't be done. And then you're the bad guy, and you're the one that's incapable of doing your job. And over time, those feelings of failure, or feelings of inadequacy, or inability to rise to the occasion, are sometimes the things that cause most cops to get into the funk. Yeah, we all hit that funk at some point in time in our career, and some hit it earlier than later. And yeah, I'm 28 years in now, and I'm certainly on my way out the door, happily. Thankfully, I mean, I'm very grateful for my 28-year career, and I would never replace it with anything else. But I certainly know that I've run my course, and I'm now the dinosaur, right? So I'm the guy that I swore that I would never be. I'm not. It's so funny because I can remember having these conversations with when I was a younger cop with other younger cops talking about the dinosaur, saying, "Yeah, we're never going to get like that." Yet here I am.
Yep.
And I'm okay with it. And I have the battle scars, and I'm allowed to be like that. And but I think being a cop hasn't been my identity for a long time, at least 12 years, if not longer. Where if somebody were to say what do I do for a living? I was an entrepreneur. I was an inventor. I was an author. I was a speaker. And then I was also a cop. It wasn't, I'm a cop. And then I also do these things on the side. Even though cop was my full-time job and the thing that paid the bills and gave me a pension and gave me medical benefits, it wasn't who I identified as. And I think what I try to share with other cops is never get stuck. Like there's this feeling and you get it every time. And I'm the rare cop because I've worked in 4 agencies. And in Pennsylvania, I don't know what's like in California. If you go from one agency to another agency, you go back to 0 in your time clock.
Yeah.
So I don't have 28 years towards my pension. I have wherever I am, whatever, I have 15 where I'm at. And that's what my pension currently is. And it's not going to be as big of a pension but I did that by design. I knew that. It wasn't like I was ignorant to the fact. But most guys stay in one place because that limitation, you're 12, 15 years in, you're like, well, I got to stay now. That'd be stupid to leave. And then the feeling of stuck inevitably happens. And when you get stuck, your mental health goes to shit because you then get eaten up and consumed by the daily negativity, the daily failures, the daily grind of just having everyone expecting you to be perfect, that it draws you into this crazy, miserable experience where it can lead to drinking and bad health habits, not exercising, all the things that happen. Cops start off 99% of the time in great shape and retire not. And there's a reason for that. And in shift work, it's just the grind that is tough. And I know you went through, and we'll get into the cause and effect of it, but you went through a massive transformation in your life. Did you go through the grind, and is that what got you there to the point where you needed to make that shift, or was it was there some other catalyst that caused you to head down that unhealthy path, which then put you at that crossroads where you had to make a decision?
That's a great question. I think it probably was a mixture of both. So early, before I even got on the department, I was unhealthy, and I was like doing everything possible for the outside to change, not realizing that I had to change internally first. I have a great mentor who was like, your outward success is always a reflection of your inner growth. And so I didn't realize that was the case. And I was always trying to fix the outside, running and just not eating and all these different diets, right? And I was going up and down and up and down. And I got through the academy somehow, got on, and then of course, gave it all like to my career. And here's the thing. We can blame a lot of it on the career, but we don't take any responsibility for changing that when we do that. So I, in the beginning, used my career as my crutch. It was like, well, I'm the court qualified gang expert. Like people were like calling me at all hours of the day when I was trying to sleep, to tell me about gangsters and what they were doing in my area. I was working massive overtime. I was making a lot of arrests. I was getting into a lot of pursuits. I was going to court. I was doing search warrants. I was doing all these things. And I was under the impression that my job was kind of like, that's just the way that you have to do it. Right. And so, yeah, I wasn't spending any time at home. I wasn't taking care of my health again. And it was just like all over the place. And my realization was, actually when my son was born is kind of in that slap in the moment, slap in the face kind of hit me, because I wasn't there. I wasn't able to be there physically or mentally. He was born at 1 pound, 9 ounces. He had to spend 73 days in the NICU. My first kid, I had to leave him at the hospital and then go home. And like emotionally and physically, I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't getting much sleep. Just the stress was through the roof. I developed shingles. And I mean, I went down this like the nervous breakdown path where I had to go see the police psychologist, which, you never talk about, right? You don't want to tell anybody about that. But it helped me to see that it wasn't my job. It was me allowing the job to do that. Because, and I want to say that again, because a lot of people blame the job for a lot of things that are happening, but in reality, it's because you're allowing it to happen. Just kind of like what you were saying, like you're in this toxic environment and then you say, well, I've got to stay here. Well, no, you don't. You don't. I mean, that's just a thought. The thought is like, oh, I've got to stay here, or it's not smart for me to leave. And in reality, like, that's just a thought. It's not the truth. Like you could leave and you could go to this other job and you can go, that was the best decision I've ever made. Right. Because if I had stayed there, like who knows what would have happened. Right. And so I made this conscious decision, like, hey, if it is me who's doing this and I see other people and they're police officers, they're successful, they've got their health and fitness under wraps, their family knows who they are. They don't come home with a pocket full of money from overtime to a house full of strangers where they actually don't know them. I'm like, if other people are doing it, then it's me. So what do I need to do? How do I need to like become that version so that I can be best for me? And so in that process, I found a lot of stuff revolving around like personal growth, around hanging out with the right people, the people who were going to push me, who had higher standards for themselves. And by doing that, yes, I found a good workout routine. Yes, I ended up losing a total of 100 pounds, but it was like, it gave me the key. And the key was like, hey, whenever you want to get better, you've got to get better. Like not all this other stuff and politics and all this stuff, because that's not going to get better. If you're waiting for that to get better before this gets better, like you're going to be in the same path. You're going to be in this grind, right? And so just coming to that realization that, hey, I can make a different decision and I can start working on me. The only part of this equation that I actually have 100% control over shifted it for me. And then, yeah, it just took off. And then I was like, okay, well, shit, if I can be really good at losing weight, I'm going to help out other people. And then after I started doing that, I'm like, hey, if I could do that, how could I become a better father? Like, I really want to not get angry at my son and things like that. And of course, my wife, like 8-9 years ago, and she's like, hey, why are you talking to me like I'm a suspect? And I'm like, okay, so I need to become better of a husband because I don't want to do that when I get home. I don't want to bring that home to her, right? And so it was like, okay, now I've been able to own this area. How can I own this area now? And you just take some of the same principles, who you hang out with and how you're growing, and you shift it into that area and you can become better. And I always find that how I get even better is when I teach other people how to do it. That's my constant thing, is like, I screw it up. I figure out what I need to do to fix it. And then I teach somebody else how to do it. And it's like this pattern of all these different areas of my life where that's just kind of like what I really love doing, is helping people see, well, they can screw it up if they want to, but they can also see me screwing it up and they can do those same things without having to screw it up for too long for themselves. Because thankfully I had that awakening moment, right? Just like you did, but I was open to seeing it differently. I can't tell you how many people I come across who aren't like that. Yes, they use excuses. I don't have time. I don't have money. I don't have this. That it just protects you from doing something different. And you stick now in this grind, and 10, 15, 20 more years goes and it doesn't get better. If you don't work on it, it doesn't stay the same. It doesn't get better. It always goes downhill. And then before you know it, you're like throwing up the white flag, right? And you're like, oh man, like I never saw this coming. And you definitely should have seen that coming. So that was kind of like a long spiel, but that's kind of like what came to mind when you asked me that powerful question.
I love it. I think, well, first of all, everything you said is spot on. But one thing I want to do is, because for me, like whenever I interview somebody who's going through a transformation or a change or a trauma, I like to dig deeper behind the scenes as to, because you didn't just have the trauma revelation. There's a trailing effect of choices and mindsets and things that led up to the point where you had to have that aha moment. So
yep.
I had mine, and I know, when you write a book about your life, you get to be really, I'm my worst critic, and
yes,
and I was able to truly see how I got to where I was, and it wasn't just my brother's death that got me there. There was a bunch of other um, mental mindset deficiencies, choices that I've made that got me to the point where I was in this cycle of hate and anger for so long that I couldn't get out of, because all those things limited my ability to identify truly what I needed to do to get out of it, which is to be honest with myself and
Mm-hmm.
realize how I wasn't living the life that God had laid out for me, that I was purposely going against that. And so
Mm-hmm.
my question is, you were living unhealthy. You said before you went in the academy that you were, up and down in weight and doing the yo-yo thing, not really doing it the healthy way, figuring out if you didn't eat and exercise more, that was the way to stay fit, or whatever the term would be at the time. What do you think, or were you able to discover the reason why you started your career in a emotional deficiency, because those choices relate to an emotional deficiency, or an emotional reaction to something that may or may not have happened. Did you ever identify the thing that got you to start there? And then that, clearly when you started your career, and then you had your family and you got married and all that stuff, all those are added stressors that
Mm-hmm.
then boil up and get you to the point where you have to have the aha moment. But under the surface, there was a bunch of things that probably were happening inside of you or in your past that started that ball rolling.
Mm. Man, you ask such amazing questions, Matt. And I'm gonna come out and I'm gonna say I recently discovered that. I recently discovered it. So I recently became a certified life coach through the life coach school. And in that process, you get to learn a little bit about how your brain works, and you get to see your thoughts. Like, you get to be the conscious observer of your thoughts. And a lot of those thoughts are unconscious. They're things that just pop into our mind, the things that, like, the limiting beliefs that tell us that we're not good enough, that we're not enough, that we got to do more, that we're not a good this, not a good that, it's not possible for us. And when I was going through this course, like, I started to think about that in terms of like what was holding me back then. And it had a lot to do with the limiting beliefs that I kind of had instilled in my brain, that like, I'm not enough. Like, I've got to do more. I've got to help more. I've got to be more. And I've got to put myself on the back burner if at all costs. Like, I've always got to be that person who helps everybody else. And I mean, it even started from like when I was a kid, like, it was just me and my brother, and my dad and mom got divorced, and my dad was like always working. If you can't see, like, that's the same thing I was doing, right? He was always working. And so me as a 14-year-old boy, I had to make dinner. I had to help get him up. I had to help get ready for school and all those. And so that was kind of like me being thrust into the adult life really early. I mean, I remember I had a paper route at 13 because all my dad would have in the refrigerator was ketchup and beer. Like, it was like, that was it. And so if we wanted something different, we wanted to get food at school, like we had to help each other out, me and my brother, who was younger than me. And what this life coaching really showed me is that, so there's two distinct things. There's the circumstances. It's like the things that everybody can agree on that happened. And then there's the way that you think about them.
Right.
And the way that you think about them, when you realize that you actually can take conscious control over this, that's when I realized I could do something different. Is because, let me give you an example, okay? Because a lot of people, when I talk about this one will really make a lot of sense. So a circumstance could be COVID-19, all right? Now, when I say that word, what pops into your head are all the sentences and thoughts that you think about it. But what if I told you that COVID-19 isn't bad or good? It exists. It's a virus. It's like this little virus that has this spiky things, right? Each one of us has a different interpretation of it. I can tell you that being a business owner and talking to a lot of people who are online business owners, some of them are like, this is terrible. Like, my business sucks. My health sucks. I've lost like all this. I've gained weight. But guess what? I've also talked to people who are like, I know that the actual situation, I don't like people dying and getting sick, but my business is better than it's ever been. I've spent more time with my family. I feel better connected with my kids than I've ever have before. I've lost weight because now I'm at home. I'm not having to go to work and have to eat out at like all of these bad food places that I would normally. And so you see, you get to make that decision based off of how you think about the circumstance. So that happens with everything. So if my son, let's say, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, he has this thing where he's out like at the dinner table and he likes to just burp super loud. Like, we're in the middle of, he's like 12 years old. He's like that kid, right? And so he burps. The circumstance is like, a noise came out of his mouth. The thought is like, that's disrespectful. Why would you do that at the table? I'm going to show you, like, who do you think you are? All those thoughts really lead me down a different path, right? They lead me down a path of anger, resentment, yelling at him. Or I could say, okay, if I was 12 years old, I'd probably do that too. That's a little bit funny. Yeah, I might talk to him about it because I'm like, hey, buddy, no, if you could. But really, like, I have that opportunity to decide. And in some countries, like when you burp, it's a sign of like, hey, this is really great food. Yep. See, and just because it's the thought, it's the beliefs that we have implanted that are like, oh no, that was totally disrespectful. And I'm like, that's cool if you want to think that thought because you'll go down that path, but you have to be comfortable with the results of all that. Because in the end, you're yelling, you're screaming, you're not talking for the rest of the night. You're just on a different level than when you are with your family, Or you can be like, hey, buddy, that was really funny. I probably would do that too, but could you just do us a favor and just like maybe even just like close your mouth or just, just on a different level, just the level of connection is so much deeper because of the way that I took that circumstance. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of what I found out this past year is what I was doing is I was making the circumstance of having a police career mean that I can't be healthy, mean that I can't spend time with my family. I thought I had to be a good police officer or be a good father. And you could be both. I mean, it's a decision. You can choose to say, hey, I want to do that. How could I do that? Right? Ask a great question like, how might I make both of those possible? And by asking those questions, then, like you said earlier, you're open to the answers. But if you're like, hey, I can either do this or this, you're not open to anything. You're open to like, I can pick one, pick or choose. I choose this one. And that's what I did for like a long time. And I screwed it up for a long time. And I'm here to say, like, you don't have to. You can make a different decision based off of the circumstances that are kind of thrown your way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that's, first of all, getting to the point where you recognize that is huge. But I also think, and something that you said that I resonate, and my parents got divorced when I was 9 months old. So it was just my mom, me and my brother.
Wow.
12 when she remarried. So for all those years, I remember my mom working 3 jobs.
Yeah.
I remember her coming home between jobs, laying on her legs hurt so bad. She was a cocktail waitress at one of her jobs. And then she had to go work the overnight shift at like a local AM, PM place, slice some deli meat or whatever. And then get 3 or 4 hours sleep and go to her day job. And we would sit on her legs because the pressure made her legs feel better, the muscles feel better. So we would sit on her legs and she would give us candy bars at like 11 o'clock at night. And I just remember thinking how hard my mom works and sacrifices for us. And I think I became a survivor instead of a thriver. Like I learned how to survive. I learned how to be on my own. I learned how to do all the things you talked about with making food and taking care of my brother and getting into fights in the projects we lived in. Like I survived. And when you have a survivor mentality, it's different than a thriving mentality because you're doing things to get through instead of grow. And I think if you recognize your survivor mentality, which is a great trait to have, especially during the zombie apocalypse, but it's one of those things where I'm super thankful that I will never not be okay.
Right.
My family will always be okay, no matter what the circumstances. That doesn't mean it's always going to be the best, but I know in the worst, we're good. And I think learning how to be your best and allowing that best to grow and thrive is the key. And I had to learn that my gifts are helping people. My gifts are serving people. My gifts are connecting with people. I'm not necessarily a social person. I certainly don't have a large group of friends. I have a very small, tight-knit circle. But I do love connecting like this. And I love sharing good news and great stories and inspirational moments with people because I think people need to hear that more than they do the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And I think when people can go back in time and relive their life and assess it, right? I realized that I was simply surviving. And that's why I couldn't get off the hamster wheel.
Right.
I wasn't living. I wasn't growing. I wasn't thriving. I was just surviving. And I didn't know how to do any of those other things. So that's just how I'd always been wired. And I got really good at it. And then when you take the thing that literally was my daily go-to, which was take care of my brother, and you remove that from my to-do list, my survival package. I felt like I was naked, like I had nothing left. And that over time became this theme of I have no purpose, I have no reason, I have no matter what, I'm serving my country, serving my community, whatever, it wasn't fulfilling that missing piece now that was left. And I think identifying those things and being willing to be self-critical and then also forgiving of yourself for having those things it was the key to getting me to write this. And then understanding that what I was doing in the moment was healing myself. That was my therapeutic component. But what it became was this gift to many others to go, oh shit, I'm going through something similar, or I'm feeling the same way, or I'm a survivor too, and I understand how to make it through every single day with all these survival instincts, but I don't really know what to do with anything in my life that's positive. I can just handle the negative.
Right.
And I think, and as cops, I see cops falling into the I can only handle the negative.
Right.
Instead of figuring out how to make it their job, not just the performance of their job and the things they come in contact with, but how do they take their position, their role, and turn it into a positive growth piece versus a constantly surviving the day and the shift.
Man, that first off, that is awesome, because it's kind of like that differentiation between running towards what you want as opposed to running away from what you don't.
Yep.
And I see that all the time, even with like health and fitness. And like when you were kind of describing that, I could actually picture like myself going through this, because back when I was trying to lose weight, at first I was trying to run away from the pain. I was trying to outrun like how I was feeling and the energy and like what's going to happen to me when I get older. And like, I want to be able to see my kids and all that kind of stuff. And there's a different energy and vibe that comes from that, rather than running towards what you want. And when you're like, hey, I want like this extra energy. I want to be able to like run around with my kids. I want to be able to, and when you're doing that, like you just show up better for yourself. You said one key thing, and this is something that I do repeatedly, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of police officers do. And that is like beat yourself up. Like we're our own worst critic, and we all hate seeing like or hearing like everybody else giving their 2 cents whenever there's like a video replay about a police incident, right? Like everybody's Monday morning quarterbacking, right? But we're like the worst at doing that to ourselves. Like if there's somebody who should have our own back, it should be us, right? I mean, we're the only ones who see the behind the scenes, all the stuff that's going on. And I can't tell you that so many times in my life, it was kind of like, I guess it was like sort of hiding. It was this thought that like, if I beat myself up about this, it won't happen again the next time. That is false news. That is false news. There's nothing positive. If you sit down and like write out all the positive things that have happened to you because you've beaten yourself up, there's none. Like there's no positive about that. So instead of focusing on that, focusing towards what you want and what you want the next time to look like. Yes, you can look back in your past and go, okay, that didn't work out, but what can I learn from that? Right. But we're so much focused on the past sometimes that we're doing that. We're kind of like trying to run away from our past rather than towards what we want in the future. Right. And if we can switch that around, like, what would the end goal actually look like for me? Like if I had success over here, what would that look like for me? That's another great question to ask. So I connect with a lot of people and I help first responders with health and fitness, but I'm getting more into like helping them connect better with their family. Cause I feel like they like, we don't do it on purpose. Like we say they're important, but we don't show them they're important. And so one of the things I ask them, cause they're like, you know what, I want to have a better connection with my wife, or I want a better connection with my kids. I'm like, what does that look like? What would success look like to you? If you say, hey, I want to have a better connection with my kids, what does that look like? And then you see them and their eyes just kind of light up and they're like, well, we're going over here to the park. They're connecting with me. We're talking to deeper conversations than just hi and bye. Like they're looking forward to me coming home, just like when they were kids, right? And they're like, oh, daddy's home, right? And it's like they can paint that picture and then they can go out and get that. And now they're running towards what they want versus what maybe they've had in the past that they're kind of like, afraid of, and they're trying to run away from. So I always ask that question. I'm like, what would success look like for you? Even with your health and fitness, like just because somebody else on Instagram has this great picture of themselves in a 6-pack, like maybe that's not what you want. right? Are you willing to put in the work to get that? Most of us aren't, right? But you're like, you know what would success look like for me? Well, maybe it's 3 times a week I'll be working out. Maybe it's like I'll eat like 70% of healthy foods, and then the other 30% I'll get to do whatever and drink or whatever. And just like figuring out what that success would look like to you, then you can design a plan to kind of get there, as opposed to like running away from like what you're scared of. But then at that point, like you don't have that vision of where you actually want to go. So I could see that happening as you were kind of talking about that story about how that actually happened with me. Is I changed away from running away from things, and I started to go, okay, what do I want that to look like? Because right when you have the GPS, you got to figure out like where you want to go before you actually figure out the map, the roadmap to get there. And then once I figured out and I picture that out of what it would look like, then I could figure out how to get there, which was surrounding myself with mentors, surrounding myself with other people who are willing to grow and wanting to go that direction too. And then of course, like reading certain books, listening to awesome podcasts like this, all that kind of stuff. And it just stimulated me to continue to make those progress and take those actions every day to get there.
I think that's, first of all, the perception of reality is key. Like instead of, both are real. You have things in your past that you don't want to deal with, or you're trying not to deal with, and there's clearly ambitions and goals that you want to have in your life, but which one are you focusing on? Which perception is your current reality? And I've spent a lot of time over the last probably 4 or 5 months, quantum physics and energy and vibrations and all that. I'm the 5D. Like I'm really focused on those things because it's, first of all, it's fascinating to me. Secondly, it's I worked off my gut my entire life. Why am I so good at what I do? Why am I able? I learned how to read body language and understand human behavior by growing up with an autistic brother who couldn't speak. But then throughout my life, I realized that I had this innate ability to read other people, and then really became an expert at it. And then, but why is it that people that don't have my skill set and my background and my experience growing up with my brother, why do cops say, yeah, I can, the minute I walked, I knew something was off? Like, what is that? Like, what is that intuition? What is that gut? What causes that? And understanding that your energy that you put out and the vibrations that you emit, the frequency you're working off of, we naturally can feel it if we allow ourselves to acknowledge that we're sensing them. And when you walk in a room and you say, man, you could cut the tension in that room with a knife, there's a reason for that. And I love looking into those obscure, most people think it's obscure, I think it's right out in front of us, but what causes that, and how we're all just cells filled with electricity, and that frequency and those energies are constantly being raised and lowered within us. And how do you control that? And I think when you think about, I wake up every day and I say the same thing: how am I going to impact the world in a positive way today? That's kind of my mantra every morning. And some days I do, some days I don't. Some days I do big, some days I do it small. But my intentions are to be impactful. And I think, one of the things I teach, and I mentor kids, I try to stay away from adults because quite frankly, I don't give a fuck about their broken. I'm fixing a broken 1957 Chevy is not nearly as fun as building a car from scratch for me. And I really love working with kids because I think they're just moldable sponges. And when you can give a kid, and you see that appreciation for those moments when they have success, is a lot more rewarding for me. But I understand why people coach adults. I'm not necessarily wired to do that. But I think for both, no matter if it's a child or an adult, teaching them about intentions, living intentional lives, not just being, not just existing, not just waking up and allowing your, I work Monday through Friday. I get home, I eat dinner, I watch a couple programs or TV shows and go to bed and wash, rinse, repeat. And on the weekend I'm off and I mow the lawn and we go grocery shopping and I go to a kid's sports game, and then Monday I wake up and do it all over again. Like that, to me, can't be what we're here for. It has to be an intentional purpose, intentional reason why we get up every day, outside of the mundane, which is autopilot, right? What can you do intentionally to impact the world? Not just your family, but what can you do to be better for the universe, so that the energy, the collective energy, the collective vibration, the collective mindset can resonate wider.
Mm-hmm.
And when you give kids the understanding of how they can control that intentional component, like I always tell kids, you can be a leader every single day. And leadership is simply just helping someone else and not asking for anything in return. That's really the bare basics of what leadership is. And I'm like, you're in school and someone's in front of you and they're going the same direction, speed up and open that door for them. I said, and see how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
And do that as many times as you want that day. And if you do that intentionally, seeking out those moments, I promise you, the end of that day, you're going to go, I feel amazing.
Yep.
And it's not because you did any grand gesture of greatness, because you took the time to intentionally live a moment where you help someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can teach people to have the mindset that that's what they're wired to do, and that's what the world needs, and that's how you live your very best life. And if you can be intentional about that, you can be intentional about anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key to overall success and happiness, and making sure you never get on that hamster wheel of depression and anger and hate, is when you intentionally live your life knowing that you can make a positive impact in it.
I love that. Intentionality is everything. And even if you do get on that hamster wheel, being intentional about getting off of it, right? Connecting with somebody who maybe can help you out, maybe somebody who's been there before, or a professional, somebody who could give you the advice you need so that you can make that adjustment. But yeah, I'm with you with all that intentionality. Like whenever I wake up in the morning, I do something very similar. I have like a list of activities that I do every single day. There's 11 activities that I do, all the way from the time that I wake up. Practice gratitudes. I practice something called affirmations, and affirmations are just like thoughts that I want to say over and over and over again so they can become actual beliefs in me so that I don't have to think about them anymore. I read personal development. So I have these lists of things that I do. And for me, I always ask myself, like, how can I make the biggest impact? And it starts with that, with me, right? Because if I can impact this person, everybody else is easy. The hardest person to lead is this person right here. I promise you, because I'm a master. I can convince myself not to do anything. So if I get off on the right foot, right? I don't immediately go check social media. I don't just go and wake up and go to work. Like, I focus on what enters, exercise and gratitude and personal growth, so that the rest of the day, man, it flows seamlessly most of the time. There's a lot of times that it doesn't flow, but it's just so much better than what people coin as waking up on the wrong side of the bed. And what that is like the first thing that you do, if that like pulls you off into that other path, you're on a completely separate path, because now, like we talked about, like, you're now looking for the justification as to why this is a bad day. You're like, oh, that person cut me off. Oh, that person did this. Oh, my wife said this. Oh, and you're like literally now looking for those, right? But you could easily just say, hey, how about that? How can I make somebody else's day better today? Now you're looking in your day-to-day activity of like, hey, how can I speed up and open the door for them? How could I do this? How could I, and when you're looking for that, the other stuff is happening too. I'm telling you, it's happening. Those comments are being made. Somebody's cutting you off, but you're like, just a circumstance, right? I don't have to think all of these thoughts about it. It doesn't mean all these things that I make it mean normally. And you're right. It's just that being intentional with just your brain and being intentional with setting yourself up for success every day. And it doesn't go like this all the time. I know that we're talking about this like as if it's just, it's perfect, picture perfect. Everything works out fine. It doesn't. And on those days, I take that as like a learning lesson. It's like, hey, I'm here to kind of teach you something. What can I learn from this? I mean, my kids teach me stuff all the time. They're teaching me right now how to be more patient with them. They don't know it, but they are. But it's not that it's because it's perfect, and it's not because I'm broken, and it's not because none of us are broken. It's like you said earlier, you're here for a reason, and you're here to learn something. You could decide not to, and just be intentional with just being in your current, like you said, rat race, right? Or you could be intentional with like, okay, what am I supposed to learn? Like, what is this thing that's teaching me? Because every day this happens to me, and it sparks me. What do I need to learn? What do I need to grow through so that this doesn't spark me? And when you start doing that, you start making progress in like small little areas. Like you said, sometimes it's big and sometimes it's little tiny. That's what progress looks like. You wake up one day and you're like, holy, like, who am I? Who is this person? Because 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been listening to this podcast at this point. I would have been tuned out. I'd be like, this is woo woo. This is all BS. Like, whatever. Let me just go to work and just do that stuff. but I had to grow to become this person. You know what I mean? So it's not that like, if this is like something that you can't perfect, well, you're a human being like all of us. We all make mistakes. We all go through this stuff. And we're not saying this because we're better, or we're not saying this because we have it all figured out, because we don't. I really don't feel like there's ever going to be a point where I do completely figure everything out. Like, I'm always going to be in constant growth mode. And that's a complete 180 than me 9 years ago. So it doesn't matter where you're at, like being intentional about your day, about your growth, about where you want to go, about running towards where you want versus running away. Like, all of that stuff can make a huge impact. And all you have to do is like be intentional in one area, right? And you'll see that it works, and then you can move it into other areas.
It's so important for people to recognize we're in a immediate satisfaction world, right? It's, when we were kids, I'm 50. I remember when I was little and the Phillies would be playing the Dodgers out in the West Coast. I wouldn't know who won that game until the late edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer came out.
Yeah.
The next day. And it's that patience that came with, I would listen as long as I could on my transistor radio under the covers, listening to Steve Carlton, pitch against Tommy Hutton. And I'd be like, I gotta go to sleep. I gotta get up for school.
Yeah.
And then I'm waiting till I get home for that late edition newspaper to find out who won the game and how did Carlton pitch and did Schmidt hit a home run. But today I know what pitch, I know the speed of the pitch, I know the location of the pitch, I know, was it a changeup, a curveball, or a slider, or a fastball, literally nanoseconds after it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have a patient world.
Mm-hmm.
And if something that's happened for me personally in 2020 is, first of all, taking, I mentioned before we got on the air that my gym business closed permanently due to the COVID restrictions. And, we made a business decision knowing that, 2 weeks of slow to spread was nonsense. That wasn't happening. Like, there wasn't going to be this quick turnaround and everything's back to normal. I kind of have at least enough worldly knowledge, having traveled around the world many times, that this was probably going to be a long-term issue. But 2020, first of all, it gave me time back that I didn't have before, or that I chose not to have before. But then it also gave me patience. And with that patience comes peace, and with that peace became clarity. And in the most fucked up year of my life, it's just impossible for all the things that have gone wrong in our world to happen consecutively, is almost impossible. And I would say it's impossible. But what I got from this was this calmness. And people are like, how can you be so calm?
Mm-hmm.
I reinvented myself 4 times in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the needs that were in front of me. And I used my skills and my strengths and my ability to think rationally and critical thinking and being empathetic, and also be tough at times. Like, I used all of my skills in 2020, which then brought me an immense amount of peace and an immense amount of clarity. 2020 was a gift for me. Just like my brother's death, ultimately the worst day of my life was also the biggest gift of my life, because had my brother not died, had I not gone through that trauma, had I not suffered for 13 years in depression and anger and hate, and then come out of it, I wouldn't be doing 99% of the things that I've done in my career since 2002, when I had my aha moment. In my relationship with my children, I didn't mention this to you, but my daughter's 23. We had her, we got married in May, got pregnant in June. She was premature. She was 5 pounds. She was, beautiful baby. I couldn't love her. I didn't know how. I knew I had a responsibility to take care of her, but there was no connection. I didn't love my wife. I knew my wife was brilliant and beautiful and the greatest thing in my life, but I didn't know how to express love. And that was everything in my life. That was the cycle of my life. Was I was intentionally able to do the physical operation of living, but I wasn't experiencing life.
Survival, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of when this whole thing became clear to me. After I didn't even realize it was survival. I was living in a survival mindset for all of my life, but it wasn't until after I wrote the book and then began to really explore things that I learned from reliving my life, and how does that impact me today? Like what are the lessons learned from the life lived thus far?
Mhm.
And when you can really take stock in that and start to break it down and see the trajectory and the path and the different ways life took you based on things that you perceived or did, and then circumstances, how you reacted to them,
Mhm.
you really get to, and if you're clear about it and you're honest about it, you can really paint that picture of who you are and how you got there, and then decide from that moment forward, do I want to continue on this trajectory or do I want to change it? And I think that's
Right.
where, for me, I wrote the book not knowing that the book was my saving moment of my life, but I wrote the book, and when it was done, I didn't know what to do with it. Like I didn't know, that's it? I wrote my book.
Mhm.
Okay. And it wasn't. It became like people started asking me to come speak about the book. And then I started to realize that my brother's story is impacting kids. And so schools were bringing me in to talk about my brother and
Mhm.
how, anti-bullying stuff. And it just grew, and I just allowed this to breathe and take on its life and accept it for as someone new read it, who was in this space, was like, oh, I'd love to have you come talk about your life growing up with your brother. It was an amazing book, and I think my company would love that. And it just grew into this thing. And I realized that I now had a platform to share
Right.
my brother's life, share the lessons learned from my perspective of his death and how it impacted me and the things I did wrong and the things I was able to overcome and how I came out of it. It was the greatest gift of my life because it allowed me to then become who I was meant to be.
Mm.
And without me going, this is where I'm going. And I didn't think about ambitions. Like, what did I want this to be?
Mhm.
And then when I did, and this is a lesson that I learned, when you have something that's almost like a calling,
Mhm.
when you try to box it
Mhm.
and give it a label and give it a direction, a singular direction,
Mhm.
the universe says, mm-mm, nah, that's not what
Mhm.
this is. And I tried that. I tried
Mhm.
because the speaker world, and I don't know if you've gone down that road yet, but the speaker world is this cookie cutter, like everybody follows the same blueprint. I want to be a speaker, so therefore I have to write a book, and the book is usually some bullshit book that has zero value in life. It's just another version of someone else's aha moment, or their I'm great at this, and this is your 10 ways to 10x your life, or whatever the mastermind your tribe, whatever. All
Mhm.
those catchphrases in the world, the speaker world, and it's this cookie cutter process to get yourself to appear to be this world-renowned business coach, life expert, whatever the avenue you're in.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you know what? I really want to speak. I want to share my brother's story. Like I would love to do that every day. So I fell trapped. I fell into the trap. And I'm like, all right. And I started to create this persona. And once I did that, within a month or two, everything came to a screeching halt.
Mm.
All the momentum, all the randomness of these opportunities, screeching halt. Because then I'm like, whoa, that's the universe telling me you messed with the juju, brother.
Mhm.
Get back to being you, get back to being authentic, get back to being naturally just allowing this thing to breathe, and it will take you where you need to go. And that's what I learned from this, is that some things are structured, some things you have to have a blueprint and a plan. But when you have this literally a life-saving moment that happened to me, and the organic way that this book became a book, to structure it is counter to what actually happened.
Right.
And I guess my question to you is, with your, I know, and I want to also say real quick, we have a mutual friend, Mike Odell, who's a legend in LAPD.
Yep.
And Mike and I met 25 years ago when he had his lead consultant business, law enforcement advanced development consultants. I'm looking at my top student plaque that I got in 1996 from him. Um, that's when I realized how I can control my outcomes as a cop and not be stuck. And it gave me that courage and that someone else is doing it, that you're not just a cop and that you have to go to work and work your shifts and rotate and do all that stuff and do it for 25 years, get your 50% pension and probably die of a heart attack 3 years after you get out. Like that's the path, right? And Mike showed me that you can have a life outside of law enforcement that you control, that takes a lot of what you learned in law enforcement and apply it as an entrepreneur. So I actually became an entrepreneur probably in 1998 after many, many conversations with Mike between 96 and 98. And we've been very good friends since. But, you know, it's weird how on the complete opposite side of the country is a mentor of mine who I can call at any time. And he will, if he doesn't answer, he'll call that day. And his first words, "Brother Matt, how are you?" And when you have that person in your life that you know that, and he's one of many mentors I have, but he's someone that in his lane, he's invaluable for me. You talked about having mentors, and you talked about the, you know, being an online coach and being a life coach. Was there an entrepreneurial aha in your life when you said, I'm not just going to be a cop, I'm going to utilize this gift that I have to inspire others, to motivate others, to be that person to someone else, that you're like, I can, and not to trivialize it, but turn it into a business that supplements your lifestyle and also gives you additional meaning? Was there a moment that happened, or was it a, you know, through a book or a self-help thing that you came up with the idea? Like, was there this thing that's like, this is something I want to do?
It's a great question. And I can sense some of the same thing in terms of what you were talking about, putting a box around it. Because that kind of was similar to me. So I always loved teaching and helping other people. And like you said, I thought that was what I was going to do. I was going to be 33 years on as a police sergeant or as a police officer. And I would teach, maybe do something at the academy and things like that. But everything would be like in this nice little, you know, cube of LAPD. When I first got started with my health and fitness, and I had my mindset right, and I started to lose weight and I started to get healthy, people started to reach out to me, just like what you said. They'd be like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, you look more happy, you have more energy. Like, you're saying no to some of the overtime stuff, but yet you're still able to, you know, do all this stuff financially." And it got me to just think about, okay, like, what can I do to actually help people? And I don't know if this is the same with your department, but if you have a business, you can't promote it within LAPD. So I can't do it. I can't talk about it. I even have my chief of police, by the way, on my podcast, which was incredible, but I can't necessarily promote my business to anybody who works with me.
Right. So
it was a little bit secretive at first. And it was like people were reaching out to me and I was helping them get started with what I did. And what I kind of did, and it kind of got me stuck and trapped as well, is now I had this box of like just being the fitness and nutrition guy. And like, I love getting people healthy and fit because I think it leads to like so many other areas that they can control because it's the foundation, right? But I felt like I was kind of trapped because I couldn't talk about all these other areas that I wanted people to improve in too. And so what I started to realize, and this was about 1.5 to 2 years ago, is that my gift is that I can push, I can inspire, I can motivate people to show up for what's really important in their life now. Not like some magical moment in the future when like all the fairy dust is going to be sprinkled on and then everything's going to be perfect, right? Not when the kids are back in school and you're on the best shift and you're retired and all this stuff. Like, I can motivate people to actually take action now. And so, yes, I was using that on my health and fitness team, but I was like, what other areas could I do that for? And so that's when I started to see, like, I need to lift this box off. Like, if I can motivate and inspire people to actually make what's important in their life important in this moment, that's so like limiting to say that it has to just be around their health and fitness. So I expanded, and that's when I started to put together mastermind teams. I started to put together like other people who wanted to grow, not just become healthier. Like, yes, we all want to become healthier, but at the same point, I don't want it to just be trapped in that little box. And so that's what I did, is I decided, hey, I'm not going to be trapped in this box. And to be honest, like, if somebody if somebody from LAPD comes to me and they want help, I'm not going to refuse help because I work for the organization. As a matter of fact, why wouldn't I want to help the organization that like I'm a part of be the best that they can be? Because here's the thing, when you have police officers who sleep, when you have police officers who eat healthy, who exercise, who focus on personal growth, who are connected with their family, who are like really like leading from the front and having better boundaries at work, you have a police officer that's actually going to do the right thing, right? They're not going to have brain fog. They're going to be just like, they're going to be the top people that we need them to be. Like the way that we tell people, the police officers, to run into like just situations and figure it out when they haven't slept, when they're not taking care of themselves, and where they're worried about because they haven't seen their family in 3 weeks, you know? And so for me, I'm like, I don't care if I end up getting in trouble, that's okay, because I'm impacting people on a generational level. And so for me, I took the box off of that and I'm like, okay, what can I do? So I put together some original things that didn't work. And then I created this idea of having my own mastermind team for police officers and first responders, people who understand what we do for a living. However, they do not allow that to use that as an excuse to why they can't be in amazing shape, why they can't actually connect better with their family, and why they can't set better boundaries. I mean, so many people say yes to every amount of overtime, like it's a badge of honor, like, oh, hey, I worked 42 extra hours of overtime, and they get paid and they forget that they lost track of like those things that are like really important to them. And so that's what I found is like, I found taking that approach, not only do I feel more authentic, but people lose a ton of weight when they do that. Like, I can't tell you, like, I thought I was going to like not be that fitness guy anymore and people weren't going to be able to have results like that. They have incredible results. But at the same time, I get a message from somebody, and this was like a couple months ago, and it freaking touched me. And I'm like, this is what I'm here to do. And they're like, hey, I just want to let you know, my boss called me for working overtime. I told him I couldn't do it today because I was going to, spend some time with my 2-year-old daughter. And he said, hey, I really need you. And I told him no. And I felt really disappointed in telling him no, until I got home and I got on the ground and I was crawling around with my 2-year-old and I saw the sparkle in her eye that I would have given up for an extra 2 hours or 3 hours of working overtime and getting a little bit more money in my paycheck that would have been taken by the government from all the other taxes, right? And I would have given that opportunity of connecting with my daughter away. For what? And like getting that message from him, I'm like, that is exactly what I'm talking about. You make what's important in your life important now, and don't let the thoughts of like, oh, well, I have to make money for my family. I have to. Well, here's the thing. You're saying that you can choose one or the other. Okay. Just like we said in the beginning, you can either make money and have a home over your family's head, or you can be a good parent. You could be both if you want, but you could also decide to be one or the other. But making that conscious decision is like something you get to do. And I get to do that every day in my mastermind. Sometimes I could be a little aggressive like how I am here, but really, I just want people to show up for themselves, not for what I determine is important to them. I want them to identify what's important to them. And I'm going to show them that, hey, they got to show up for that. And so that's like where my true passion is. And I've noticed that since I lead with that, my business is really taken off, especially right now. I'm on vacation. I get the ability of coaching a lot more people than when I'm working, all those extra shifts for the police work, and especially everything that's going around right now, right? Probably going to get deployed, maybe canceled for my vacation, but I'm like using this as the greatest opportunity that I can to actually make more of an impact there. And so of course people are coming to me and they're like, how can I join? How can I join? And it's because I didn't put a box on it anymore. And they're like, hey, what kind of results can I get if I'm with you? I'm like, what kind of results do you want? Because when you have the power of this, when you have this brain under your control, you can get whatever the hell you want. You just have to take control over it and realize it's never the circumstances that are kind of making that happen. It's always like your thoughts about it. And so just like that, it's like, it just lifts the box up. And I'm sure you felt the same way. It's like, now it's open, right? And you're like, this is exactly where I was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's a liberating feeling to know that you are not stuck. And wherever you are in that version of not stuck, it doesn't really matter as long as you're not stuck. And that gives you the flexibility and the courage to take chances, to take some risks, to be adventurous in your entrepreneurial life, to be more intentional in your relationships with friends and family. One thing that you pointed out that I think is very important is that, the saying no. My boss, as an entrepreneur, he knows that I have 50, 60 hours a week of additional work outside of the police department. And I told him, I said, don't call me to cover a shift or to do this unless I am the only choice. I said, I will say yes then. I will move mountains, but don't call me unless it is absolutely the only option, because I don't have, if you ask me, I'm going to say yes, because I know you're my friend, and I work in a small department. We have, Pennsylvania is like the land of police departments. There's 686 police departments in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Um, so every little municipality, every little borough, every little township has their own police force. I work in a town that's a little over 1 square mile, and we have 5,000 people and a college. All crammed into a very small footprint. Um, and he knows that, if he needs me to call me, but otherwise don't. And I think that setting those boundaries and being able to communicate that, your wants and needs and intentions, is important, whether that's in a relationship. My wife and I, before we got married, actually, we set out, and something as simple, and this is a life lesson that I like to give people, especially younger people, if you're going to be getting married or having a life partner or whatever. Setting the rules, setting the expectations, setting the boundaries, understanding strengths and weaknesses, and utilizing each other's strengths and helping to minimize each other's weaknesses. My wife and I decided who was going to handle what. Like, my wife has never started a lawnmower in 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
Why? That's my job, my responsibility. The grass is high. She's going to look out the window and go, excuse me, I think you need to get out there and cut that grass. Why? Because if there's no responsibility acknowledgement, then there's no blame and reconciliation, right? You got to be able to go through those processes. If it's like, I thought you were going to do it. No, I thought you were going to do it. You get nowhere. It turns into an argument and creates more strife. So we communicated clearly early on. We also made a decision that my wife was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was going to be the sole provider, because we wanted to make sure that our children were raised by the people that were going to make sure that they had the values and the beliefs and the morals that we have, and not allow other outside influences to have that a role in that development of who they are. And people ask me, I grew up in we're very pro-American, constitutional, conservative home, and my wife's Catholic. I'm not. I'm actually the son of a preacher. My stepdad's a preacher. But we raise our kids Catholic, and we have certain idealistic and moralistic codes that we live by. And my daughter went to college, and she had a great collegiate career. She was a 4-time NCAA academic All-American, a 6-time All-American swimmer. Phenomenal young woman, and she held true to the morals and ideals of our family and how we were raised, without having to worry about the outside influences changing who she is. And a lot of kids go off to college, and that's when they grow. And I was a firm believer that my kids grew from ages 0 to 18, like, because I was and my wife were responsible for that. That's our job as parents, is to create our children in the image of our best versions of ourselves.
Right.
And people are like, how did your daughter come back better than the version she was, but an accentuation of what she was before she left? And I said, because we spent 18 years really focusing in on that. And that was an intentional desire for us to be great parents, raise respectful, honorable, loyal, dedicated children. And that was something that's one of my greatest accomplishments. When I see my daughters excelling, I'm like, the plan worked, right? Like, you have that in your head, this is how I think it's going to go, and you've never built a human being from nothing to something, right? And it's like building a business, and it's when you see it work, and there's highs and lows, and you have young kids. My kids are 23 and 18, and my son just got a 3-year full ride ROTC scholarship at the University of Maryland. So, like, all the plans worked, but it's you've got to have that stick-to-itiveness, that intentionality in your plan, and then also the adaptability to make some changes on the fly as you see them necessary. And I think as a cop, and I think your kids are probably going to grow up very successful, very loving, caring, loyal, honest, hardworking people because of the life that you're providing for them. But I think being a cop allows you to impact them in a completely different way if you intentionally choose to use it. Not the negative shit you see, not the death and the destruction and the violence, but your ability to solve complex problems in a very short period of time.
Yes.
Not dwell on the noise.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the gifts of being a cop. I
Yeah.
always tell people all the time, and I cuss, it's my thing. I can unfuck anything in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my gift. I don't need an hour to figure out the problem and the solution. And I think
Mm-hmm.
if you're probably, whether you intentionally do it, and I'm pretty sure you probably do because of the last hour we just spent together, but using that gift to create the lives that are your legacy
Mm.
is the greatest gift you can give your kids.
I think that's it. That is extremely powerful. And like, to be honest, that's a lot of why I do what I do. Because I know that I can tell them and I can try and teach them as much as possible. But what they see me actually do every single day is going to model the behavior that they're going to end up doing when they grow older. And it's a little nerve wracking sometimes because you're like, I don't know if they're going to turn out right. I don't know about this and that. But in reality, the best I can do is lead them that way, but then also show them that way through my actions, right? And that's the same thing. Like I constantly think about that. Like, what are they going to think if I give up? What are they going to think if I do this thing, or if I, say I'm going to do something and I don't do it? Like, what kind of like effect will that have on them? Because I know that growing up, my parents had that kind of effect on me, right? Even if they told me one way, but they did it another way, and so realizing that that's the opportunity that we have every day is extremely powerful, and we don't use that opportunity every day, even though we I wish I did, but realizing that that's the kind of impact that we have every single day. We could create that legacy. We can pass that information on through our actions, not through what we say, is extremely important. And I mean, it's on the same topic that I kind of talked about. That's why I love doing what I do, because when I push people to show up for themselves, I know that their kids are being impacted too. I'm not just talking to somebody on a one-on-one conversation. I'm talking to a one on like 40, because I know
Right.
everything that this person who's about to do is now going to lay the framework for everybody else to kind of like look at and to model that behavior. And when you think about it that way, it makes it so hard for me to sleep in and to push snooze and to not work. And, oh, I'm just on vacation. And no, I'm waking up just as early, if not earlier, than when I actually go in full time, because I'm like, there's people out there who need this. And plus, like you said in the beginning, when I do this for people, it makes me feel like $1,000,000. And when I feel like $1,000,000, I show up better for those kids who, I'm not sure if you can hear, but they're trying to beat down the door saying, Daddy, you said it was going to be over already. I had to mute myself a couple of times.
I saw
but,
that.
but yeah, it's like, that's the reason why, that's the reason why I'm doing this stuff, because I can become better for them, by helping other people become better for their version of my kids. Right. So yeah, man, dude, this has been so powerful. Like, the questions that you ask and the stories that you brought up have been amazing, Matt.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to leave you with one gift. My son, who is basically me, but 18, wants to be a cop, wants to go in the military, wants to serve his country, wants to do all the things that I've found value in. And you don't always know whether or not you're hitting all the right buttons and the right notes.
Mm-hmm.
But on my birthday, he wrote a note in my card, and they always write a note, both my kids, in a card, and he just said, "Thank you for always being the example of who I want to be."
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you think about the value of what you do every day as a
Mm-hmm.
cop and as a leader and as an entrepreneur and as a husband and father. You just want to make sure that the time spent had meaning. And
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why this podcast is called Two Dates and a Dash, because you're the date you're born, the date you die, and the dash is the life that you live.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. That the legacy that you leave is felt. And they say you die twice. Once when you take your last breath, and the second time when your name is spoken for the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a son who's going to carry on my name, and I want to make sure that I'm setting up the world for the future for when
Mm-hmm.
I'm gone. Right.
Yeah.
The greatest thing about leadership is training your replacement. Right. You want to make sure that you're leaving it in a better place than when you came into it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're raising your kids, and you're in the middle of that process right now, and I think you're going to find that at some point in time you're going to get a note and a card from your kid that
Mm-hmm.
says, "Thank you for being an example of the person I always wanted to be." So let's tell people where they can find you. How they can reach out to you, how they can get your services and get your wisdom. Where can they find you?
I greatly appreciate that. So I'm everywhere. Leo Family Fitness, LEO Family Fitness. So I have my own podcast called the Leo Family Fitness Podcast. I'm on Instagram, Leo Family Fitness. On Facebook, I'm First Responder Fitness with Mark. But yeah, anywhere that I can connect, anywhere that I can help people, I'm all for it. And man, I just greatly appreciate this, Matt. And I hope that you're going to frame that letter because man, that is powerful. I mean, thinking about that, and you got it there. That is awesome. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there. And reading that, especially on those days, because we all think that like, all of us wake up and we're just all motivated and excited, but on those days that you're not, and you pull that out and you look at that, man, that fuels the fire, right? And it gets you to just snap back into it. That's a huge gratefulness moment, man. So, and I hope that's something that I get to experience too, man. Congratulations, because you worked your ass off for 18 years to make that actually happen. So, you get rewarded for wherever you plant the seed, right? And you water it and you nurture it. And now it's time to harvest.
I think that's just with everything. And that's what I hope people get out of this podcast is that, guys like you and me who are doing a job that nobody really wants. And that may not be in the climate today the most appreciated or the most valuable. But, we're living proof that we're not just a bunch of ardent assholes, that we actually have lives outside of the badge and the uniform that we wear, and that we have a desire to impact the world. And I think what you're doing is phenomenal. I think your story is amazing. I think the journey through fitness and health and weight loss is something many, many people struggle with. And it seems like a Rubik's Cube to many people that they can't seem to figure out. And having someone who has and is consistently living in that space and is as gifted and caring and empathetic and understanding and adept as you are to be their guide, to be their mentor, to be somebody that they can use as a resource is invaluable. And that's kind of when I have these shows, I love sharing that because you're going to help somebody as a result of this episode. And that's the best part of doing this job as a podcast host, is to create those moments of connection, whether it's you and I connecting or the ancillary connections that come from it. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the job you're doing out there in the West Coast, in the great fucked up state of California. And I live in the People's Republic of Pennsylvania. So we're both on the same side of weirdness, just on different sides of the country. But I appreciate you. Hang tight. We're going to talk off air right when we're done here. But everybody, thank you. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of the 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. Once again, if you want to learn more about me, go to mattcubbler.com where you can get a copy of the book of Brothers Love and Memoirs. And remember, if you're going to listen to the audio, all I ask is that you hit the automatic download and subscribe button. And also, if you want to go to my YouTube channel, Matt Cubbler, you can also hit subscribe and hit that little bell dingy thing so you can get the notifications. Everybody, God bless. Go out and be kind to one another.